So we're going to answer a question, and a few comments were there. We're going to go through that. It was a voice message that was left here for the show, an ISOM. I should remind a few people, for any time you're leaving a message for anyone, whether it's on a phone or a written message or on a podcast, there is laws in the world, so we have to be mindful of how we engage with those messaging services. That stuff can come back and haunt you. So LowJack72, we're going to answer your question. It's a reminder also to you to just take care when you're leaving messages. Okay, so unfortunately, we're not going to be able to play your message, but you do bring up a valid point, and I did get it well. So we'll answer your question, and we'll see to a couple of the comments that you've made as well. Stick around. This should be an interesting show. I think you'll learn a few things.
You are now tuned in to
An informed state of mind. The main takeaway is that you just stop and have to 2009, I made the decision to get out. Then when we got out. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to ISOM. This is going to be episode number 4. Episode number 3, we touched base there with a podcast tag there from Shammer over at the Gray Man Concept. It was like I said, his show was actually really good. He put a lot of useful information. If you haven't caught that one, go back and catch that, and then go over and check his podcast out for sure. Again, the real takeaway there is prevention. It doesn't matter if you're staying in a hotel room, anything to that nature. There's a plethora of things you need to do. Number one, be situationally aware, and like I say, try to combat any of the issues that you're seeing there. If there's room for improvement, improve it, right? There's just no room for complacency on any of that. So like I said, it was a great episode. Talking about certainly our intro here, we did get a question and a couple of comments. A couple of them were heartfelt, I'm sure, and I don't think they meant anything by it. Well, actually, I do think they meant something by it, without a doubt. LowJack72, he asked a question in regards to our first episode when we gave an example of, being informed, right? And some people just not having the information, and something that we do every day, which is drive. Now, a lot of the people that are going to be listening to this, I'm going to suggest drive, right? And if you don't, you're taking public transit or walking, good for you, and that's fantastic. But anytime that you're going to engage in any activity where there is a potential law or a regulation or a policy, anything to that nature that's going to be surrounding that or regulating it, your actions, and I'm not going to get into a big discussion on whether or not it's overkill or overreach or anything of that nature. If it's there, it's there, right? It was put there by a democratic process or a fair process, I would like to think. Otherwise, like I said, if you don't like the law, petition to your local politicians and get it changed, right? The more people you get onto that, petitions, petitions work. We just seen it actually work here in Canada, and looks like a no confidence vote might be coming for the Liberal Party if you're a Canadian listener. So yeah, having said that, we're going to go back to the traffic stop that we made. The question came back as saying, hey, Luke, did you give her a ticket? You probably did because you were trying to fill a quota, was the comment that came behind it. And there was a bunch of other stuff in there. Those are the 2 points, though, I want to touch base on. So the question was, did you issue a ticket, or did I give her a citation for the right-hand turn on a red light? The short answer is no, I didn't. Now, why did I come to that conclusion? Or what was the factors that were involved in me making that decision as a law enforcement officer? So, I can't speak for every officer out there, and it's not even really a matter of how we're trained. It really comes down to experience. There can be expectations by a department, and again, I can't speak for North America. All the law enforcement agencies out there, they're varied. Various laws, expectations of those officers, how they're funded, all those things. There's so many factors, and we could probably fill an entire season just talking about that. In this particular case, and we'll come back down to it, so a reminder, the lady had made a right-hand turn on a red light without coming to a complete stop prior to doing so. And like I said, I don't know of a location where you can make that maneuver without it being an offense. Number one, and this is, I'm going to speak from my perspective and how I go about law enforcement. It is a community-based policing model that I work off of, and I encourage all officers that are either under my command or my colleagues to do just that. And whether that's certainly up the echelon and to the senior administration, I'll defend that as well. I think it's important. One of the other questions in there was, do you have a quota? Because he said, you must be filling a quota in essence, and that's probably why you gave the ticket. No, the fact is I didn't give her a ticket. Should I have? When I look back on it, and I was talking about it even on the first episode, and I was thinking about that episode, I thought, geez, maybe I should have gave her a ticket in that. And the only reason is they would have given her an opportunity to challenge the citation, to fight the ticket and put it in front of a judge. When we get in front of a judge, we're both neutral parties to some degree. I'm a witness, and certainly the accused is a witness, or the person receiving the ticket. We're both witnesses. We're fairly equal when it comes into the courtroom. There is certainly a slight to that in the sense that I'm a professional witness in the good guy chair or the good person chair with the good person uniform on, and we've been doing this numerous times. It's not my first time. So even as I put together my brief, if I know this is going to be challenged in court, we'll put together a brief, make it comprehensive, we'll send it off to the individual who's disputing the citation, and certainly a copy goes off to the Crown. And we have a Crown, or in your particular case, in the States, like I said, if you're listening from the States, you've got, defense and prosecution and so on and so forth. And like I say, it's a good opportunity. If we didn't have a way to dispute tickets, I would never lay a ticket, right? I certainly believe that people have that right. They're not guilty, right? If you go in and voluntarily pay a ticket, you're saying, hey, I was guilty with it. And that's what you're saying. I was guilty and I'm going to make a voluntary payment, right? If you don't believe you're guilty, you can say not guilty and I'm looking to dispute the ticket and I want to put this in front of a judge, right? And I absolutely expect every single person I lay a ticket to that is going to take that option potentially. Now, I've been doing this long enough that I know, hey, I've reduced the ticket. So let's just say that, they were pulled over for speeding. It was in the third fine bracket, and they qualified for a $260 ticket, not a $130 ticket, not a $65 ticket, but a $260 ticket that comes with 3 demerit points, okay, and a pointing system that comes here. So they would be awarded 3 demerit points against their driver's license. So I might say, you know what, hey, I come back to the cruiser and I'll look up their driving record and I say, look, there's been no infractions for over 2 years. I can't see nothing on their record. They were polite. They answered all the questions that I had, which is not an obligation, certainly of theirs. And it went fairly well. I think they took the information that I was trying to offer when I stopped them. Because to me, it's education, enforcement. Right? It's kind of like a 3-strike rule to some degree, but again, it's not that clear cut, right? Every single stop, there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop. There just isn't. There's no such thing as a routine anything in policing when it comes down to it. So like I say, I didn't give her the ticket. And the reason why is because of numerous factors. Number one, they weren't actually from town. Okay, so they actually lived in the outskirts. You could tell that from their driver's license. They didn't have any other citations listed. They said they have never gotten a ticket before. I believe them. I don't think they were trying to misguide me in any fashion. They were receptive. I did take quite a bit of time. I'm going to say probably closer to 15 minutes. By the time, from the start of the traffic stop to the end, we go back, look for wants and warrants, anything of that nature. And of course, all that's coming up negative. They were pleasant. They genuinely said they didn't know. And again, I caution people though. And this is what I say, if you're going to drive, you have an obligation to understand all the laws that surround that activity that you're doing. It behooves you to do that. Well, for the obvious reason is that somebody could call you on that action, A lot of the time, we're just not paying attention, or we push the limits. Maybe we do know that we're speeding, but we think, yeah, law enforcement, you're allowed to go over a certain amount. That's just not true. You're not allowed, right? It's against the law. If the speed limit is 50 miles an hour or 80 kilometers an hour in a particular speed zone, 81 or 51 is speeding. There's no question about that. And there is a citation or a regulation or codified law, anything of that nature that will speak to that, right? And so, yeah, you could qualify for being cited for that, right? Which come with a monetary penalty or points that can drag around for 2 years, maybe affect your insurance, and moreover, the safety aspect of it. The reason why these parameters are put in place, again, it's not because a council or a province or state just decides one day, hey, we're just going to make it this because it just sounds like a good number. There's a lot of factors in why they actually put speed limits the way they are. Whether there's a curb line, whether there's sidewalks, whether it's a park area, school area, retirement home, funeral home, whether the shoulders, the width of the road, the construction of the road in some cases, like I said, the width of the road, whether the road is the curb line or the shoulder of the road is paved versus not paved, whether there's a median wall, whether there's a median with grass that can certainly slow down vehicles on a split lane highway. There's just numerous factors as to why speed limits are put in place. The other factor is that we understand that in some particular applications, when you get over 60 kilometers or 60 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour, and that's a pretty common number, the likelihood of surviving, for instance, like a head-on collision, decreases with every kilometer, every mile over that speed limit. It decreases by a certain percentage. The stats don't lie, right? Whether you wear a seatbelt, you don't wear a seatbelt. Whether or not, again, it just, we could go on and on and on about the different factors that formulate why we have certain laws in place. Usually it's because something has taken place and that there's given some kind of data that we can reliably lean against to create regulations or laws, right? And to safeguard the community. And that's our primary focus. And I'd like to think that every single police department in the world is focused on good community policing and safeguarding our community so that we can peacefully enjoy any place that we occupy at any given time, whether that's in our homes, whether that's certainly on our local streets, our highways, in our parks, malls, etc. And certainly private properties can have their own regulations, right, that will not circumsede the higher law, and in most cases they won't. So like I said, the guidestone would be the provincial law or the state law, and then certainly down to a municipal law and so on and so forth. And of course, there's a hierarchy with that. But again, I felt that the individual had taken the educational stop, and that's what I call it, as an educational stop, to say, hey, maybe I'm not aware of that, and maybe they were in a hurry or whatever the case. So let's investigate that and see actually what's on the go. And I was confident that they really just genuinely didn't know. Right. So again, is that an excuse for the law? No, it's definitely not. You could still be cited. Right. The next officer that was in the exact same scenario absolutely could have laid that citation or that ticket. And again, it comes with experience, right? Compassion, I guess, understanding of what the fuller picture is of what we're actually doing out there, right? Do we work for the community? Absolutely work for the community. Are we paid by the community? In a lot of cases, we are paid by that community, or community funds or taxes that come in, and certainly funds our safety and security, right, or our protective services. So the idea is that it's not, and not every problem's a nail, and not every problem needs a hammer, and so that's it. As far as the quota is concerned, I'd like to say there's just no such thing. You know what? As many police departments there is across North America, I'm going to suggest there probably is. It's wrong. And I can say that wholeheartedly. And I would invite any administrative personnel from any police department to send me a message and like that, and we can have them. I'll even have them on the show, and we can talk at that, at length. It's bad in a lot of different ways. Okay. Not just the fact is that I think it's a constitutional, challenge in that sense, or even, a breach of our Constitution or our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and here in Canada, it does. You know what? It's not productive for officers to live within a quota system like that. We lose focus on the bigger picture, right? The bigger picture is community safety. That's it. So what we're looking at that is there's a performance expectation, right? And I would agree with that. Anytime that you hire somebody, the job description doesn't necessarily list that you are required to do X amount of this or X amount of that, or, whatever that is. So a law enforcement officer, you're expected to do these things, and these are the training qualifications you have to have, and you'll have to update those training qualifications, quarterly, biannually, annually, whatever the case is. And those is part of the job descriptions. But like I say, it's once you get into the backroom settings, if you would, and you're up there and you're in briefing and what have you, a commander or a staff sergeant, anything like that, can certainly captain, whatever the title is, whoever's leading that platoon or that department or staff, can say, hey guys, we want to see those numbers get up there. The reason why is because there is data, there's historical data that we can look back to and say that, well, the population has only grown, right? We know there's people out there breaking the law. Right. We know this because the mayor's office or maybe the council or we're seeing it in Facebook pages, for instance, if, in particular communities, you've got some of these group pages that, are part of maybe many group pages that are within cities and towns and so on and so forth. And you can kind of get a feel of the heartbeat of the community and what they feel is not being looked into. A lot of the time, and because of the numbers, and there's been a hiring problem in law enforcement for quite a few years, defund the police initiatives and so on and so forth, which I think is just a terrible initiative. It's a bad idea, right? We do need law enforcement. We need community police officers. Moreover, it's important. And there's a lot of different divisions, right? And they all have a very important function in safeguarding community safety, right? So, like I said, if you're a traffic officer, there's going to be a performance expectation that you go out there and actually do your job. Right? And why wouldn't it? You would expect that as a community member, portion of your taxes is going to funding that police department, that they actually go out there and do their jobs, keeps the streets safe, right? So that there's not speeding, there's not unwelcome noise from vehicles traveling over that are not even safe to be on the road. Their underbodies are rusted out or the mufflers are gone, and it's just it's a problem on the senses. Speeding, of course, reckless driving. And again, not stopping on a right-hand turn. We got a child that's going down the sidewalk and they think they've got a right-of-way, and boom, somebody just doesn't look. They look right, but they don't look left, and there we have an issue. And so again, laws are put in place for a very, very particular reason, right? A lot of these questions that, and comments that certainly LoJack 72 had put out there. LoJack, a lot of this stuff is online. You could educate yourself instead of coming back with, and I'm just going to say it, an ignorant response from yourself. It's, and how you put it, well, you could do a better job, right? And again, you could tell me to go pound salt, and that's okay too, right? It's a platform, and I'm expecting to get some heat on from time to time. And so, like I said, you did sound quite passionate about it, quite passionate about what you were saying, and that's good. And I'm not laughing at you in that sense. I'm really not. I get it. I do. Right? I've heard it a million times. I maybe not a million times, but I've heard it plenty. Okay. This is the same thing. It's the same thing. Well, there must be a quota. It's the end of the month quota. And it's just not the case. Not where I've worked, not ever where I've worked, right? There's been performance expectations, as there should be. We want to make sure that officers are out there doing their jobs, right? And it's difficult. It's easier when you're traffic because that's all your job is traffic. But if you're a general beat officer or general patrol, you're answering case file calls. So this could be a domestic at one point. This could be a criminal file as far as maybe a break and enter or a sexual assault. And these files take time, right? There's the investigation portion. And if your divisions are set up differently where you've got resources, so you maybe a beat officer takes the initial call and then hands it over to detectives or a different branch, maybe a drug squad, anything of that nature, that could take place as well. But nevertheless, when we generate in communities, when we generate criminal files, there's an expectation that we see it through to the end. There's also an expectation that we're not needlessly dragging something through, that the prosecution has no expectation, right? They shouldn't be processing anything, that there's no reasonable expectation to find a conviction at the end of it. Why? Well, because we're putting undue stress on an individual, right? I mean, if we had no expectation of that we were actually going to find a conviction at the end of it, because we thought, yeah, we got it right from the beginning. We got the right person, right? From good investigative actions. We had the right person, we've got the right information, we've got witnesses, everything is lining up just fine. We're going to go ahead and do what we're supposed to do. But at any given point, we find a break in that cycle or that process, and there's a break in there. That's what prosecution's job is, right? Is to look at it and go, okay, there's a problem here. We're not going to be able to get a conviction on this, and it's highly unlikely. Or the witnesses that we do have are not going to be reliable. So, like I said, it's not a perfect world we live in, right? An officer can do their very, very best and still come out with, a fail at the end of it to some degree. And that's exactly what the victim or victims is going to think. Well, why? This is clear cut. I know what happened. You know what happened. We say we understand that, but we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt when it comes to a court, right? We have to be able to paint that picture and reproduce the information exact, from exactly what happened. That we got to paint that picture for a jury, the judge, all parties involved. There's disclosures. Disclosures can take so much time. By the time you get all the information, especially if it was a drug case or any kind of major investigation where there's multiple divisions or multiple people that are involved, multiple witnesses, a lot of moving parts, all of that has to be transcribed and laid out very, very well, and then provided as part of disclosure so that everybody understands exactly what is happening, including the person, the accused, so that they can formulate a defense. And that's very, very important. So as far as quotas, when we try to push a quota, right, and any platform in policing, it's really a bad idea, because you could be forcing officers into basically dragging people through the mud, dragging them through a process, a very difficult process, a stressful process, that they say, yeah, there's no reasonable expectation. So whether or not you go there and go, yep, I've got my 4 charges for the week, criminal charges, and I've got my 12 traffic citations, and so on and so forth, and there it is. I've checked all the boxes off if we want to believe in a quota, right? The problem is that if we had to push to try to get any of those, and we find unreasonability there, or we find something that there's not a reasonability in finding guilt, right, or finding a conviction at the end of the day, that certainly is a waste of the officer's time, right? It's a waste of the court's time, waste of resources, right? But at the same instance, we have to try. We have to do our best and explore and investigate to see whether or not we can actually fulfill our obligation or our duty, right, to safeguard the community, right, through the laws and processes that are in place. And sometimes it just doesn't work out, right? So like I say, and there's enough to do without forcing it. I can promise you on that. Like I said back there before, there is a hiring problem all through the United States as well. And it's currently still ongoing. All right, defund the police really took hard effect on that. It did a couple of different things. It did force police departments to clean up a couple of different problems that were present, without a doubt. So if we look at a couple of things that I wrote down a couple of things that I really want to make sure that we're not missing, for instance. And it's, like I say, it's, LoJack, I get it. I do. I get your frustration with it and why you think that way. I really do. I could offer you all kinds of articles. It almost seems redundant to offer you articles because there's just so much out there that says to the contrary of what you're suggesting, right? So a couple of things I want to touch base on. One of the most commonly employed measures of police performance, okay, and so this is what I'm going to speak to. Direct measures of police performance commonly used and include crime rates, number of arrests and fine issued, clearance rates, okay, and how we actually clear a call, right, so that file is now closed. And calls for service and response times combined. This is all used in developing and securing budgets as well, right? So if we want more funding, we would have to prove that. Now, I can say that yes, this could be ripe for abuse. There's no doubt. Whether that's happening, I can't speak to that, right? I don't know. What I can say is that anywhere I've been involved, I have not seen any evidence of that taking place. It's a genuine need. We need more officers. There's files where we say, look, it's a stolen bicycle from a shed. We're not getting to that call for 2 days, right? There's nobody at risk. The crime has already happened. The bike is gone. All we can do is go into a reactive stage and say, we'll send an officer over to take some information. If you've got serial numbers and such, we can put that in. If the bike surfaces, we can get it back to you, right? If one of the beat officers has a person stop and it's a legitimate person stop and there's no issues and they happen to look at the bike, it looks like it's been painted, maybe we can grab the numbers and we can put it through the database and go, oh, look at that, this bike's stolen. Now we've found somebody in possession of stolen property, whether they stole it or not. They could have innocently bought it from a garage sale, or that's maybe what their statement's going to be, but we'd have to prove otherwise, right? So like I said, it might take us 2 days to even get to that call, or maybe more in some cases. In some cases, and I've heard this, right? And I'm going to be honest with you, I've witnessed it, where we never get to a call, right? It just never happens. It just really gets lost, and that's really unfortunate. But it comes down to resources. So if we go back and just what I wrote here, historically, police services have set up their performance metrics, as we call it, in a catch-all fashion, trying to measure everything and anything related to police work. And in fact, much of what is put forward under this rubric of performance is more of the nature of what could be referred to as a broad environmental scanning indicators, Okay, and that's certainly from a manual here that we've gotten some training from, rather than those related to the effectiveness or efficiency of the police services. So there's a lot of different types of platforms and matrix to type of platforms to maintain the data and track this. And again, it's for their own internal purposes and looking at crime rates and such to say, okay, well, then there's more of a need. And this is certainly what councils and mayors look at as well. Police boards, they'll look at these things and say, okay, well, this is where we're on track to. It looks like, crime is up. This justifies putting more officers or moving their officers around in different divisions, and we'll beef up traffic. For instance, if there's a problem, we might transfer an officer from one division to another, and those stats are really important for that. So what I can say is that in Canada, at least, there's no legislative requirements that control or dictate the use of specific performance measures or standards in policing. On the policing end of it, in that sense, right? There just really isn't a standard, right? A legislative standard. There is, don't confuse this, because there is absolutely standards in a lot of different things on how we actually execute the law. Use of force is a big one, for instance. There absolutely is definitely standards that are put out there for that. So like I say, some provinces, for instance, and I'll speak to provinces because this is what I'm familiar with, we do require, police reports, specific indicators on the performance under municipal performance regulations, for instance. Those do exist for sure. But there's just no evidence-based performance standards or existing, industry accepted measurement frameworks available for police services. And in Canada anyways, there just isn't. They're making some improvements, and they are trying to get some performance, I guess really, I guess, how do I want to say that? An acceptable standardization, reporting, balanced, matrix that every police department can use, so we know this is working, and then when we make changes to it, it goes clear across the board, and it's not willy-nilly all the way across. And so we got one service doing it and one service not doing it, and that's not very productive either, and we understand that. So, like I say, we look at, there's probably about seven different ones, and I might have to come back and correct that. But like I say, we don't want to reduce criminal victimization. That's a big one, right? We want to make sure that we hold adult and youth offenders, right, to account for for the inappropriateness or the appropriate ways. We do have youth criminal justice forums. We have diversions. That are, and of course, it needs to be appropriately vetted, right? If you're going to divert somebody from the court system or the justice system in a different program that doesn't involve the law to the greater degree, that this needs to be appropriately vetted, right? So that's important. One of the other ones is reduce fear of crime and enhance personal security with increased education, I guess is a better way of saying that. So we want to, again, this is what I talk about, the idea that we educate, and then we enforce, right? We try to educate as much as we can. We're educating everybody when we do a traffic stop, for instance. There's 25 vehicles, 35, 55 vehicles that travel by, depending on where you have that traffic stop. Trust me, there's 55 people out there that know there's police officers working that highway right now, right? And so we've educated those people, and they look down at the speedometer going, oh, gee whiz, there it is, I'm speeding. Now, not everybody's going to pay attention to that and actually reduce their speed and correct their speed going forward for the next 2-3 months or years. But like I said, and then we get behind and we put the pedal down a little bit, right? And, well, you roll the dice with a lot of different things: running into an officer, running into another car, having an MVC, a motor vehicle collision. And the reason why they call it a motor vehicle collision and not an accident is because an accident signifies that nobody was at fault, right? Where a collision, there's always somebody at fault with these things, unless we talk about the act of God, where a moose jumps out in front of you, anything of that nature, and it's not always because you're traveling too fast or anything of that nature. It's just things do happen. We do understand that, and we categorize that appropriately, as far as I'm concerned. But again, reducing fear of crime by presence is important. So again, reducing that criminal victimization. Again, laying charges that are not necessary. There's no likelihood of a conviction, for instance. That in itself, we can reduce, victimization, not necessarily criminal victimization, but reducing victimization in that sense, right? They feel like they're a victim because they've been targeted. Well, we don't want that to be the case either. I had this, and it reminds me of a kid that I kept running into because he kept breaking the law. he's like, man, why do you keep on harassing me? I said, I'm not harassing you, right? And, it's like, well, then why do you always come up here and you try to keep arresting me? Better stop breaking the law. We wouldn't have this problem, right? I said, the last 4 times I've dealt with you, I've educated you every single time. The last time we dealt with you, we also laid some charges, and that's why you're pressing to go to court. And again, we haven't even got to court yet, and here you are, and you're breaking the law on something that I actually told you about the second time, right? We covered this. Theft is theft. Stop taking stuff that doesn't belong to you, right? It's not because you made a mistake, right? This was an absolute choice. And it wasn't because they absolutely needed to steal. To eat or anything of that nature. And again, we've talked about that. It's there's other options out there, right? And I'm more than willing to explain those options and provide pamphlets, and in some cases even provide a ride if they need that. We're not a taxi service, but like I said, it's good community policing, and you can be a better community police officer, right? As far as I'm concerned, in smaller towns. And it's a little more difficult when you're going call to call to call, and you're still 20 calls behind on the screen. And some would say, no, it's not difficult. You deal with what you can, and that's it. Well, there's some truth to that too, right? So then again, increasing safety in the public spaces, more presence. It's huge, right? Using the financial resources fairly and efficiently and effectively. This is what we're trying to target, certainly in Canada, and I'm sure across the United States. And so those are important fundamentals. And this is what we're consistently trying to work on. Using the resources we have, right, without asking for more. And sometimes we can ask, but we ain't getting it. So we have to use that effectively and efficiently, right? And so, like I said, if you've got officers out there just hammering everything, well, that means that especially if they're pushing the envelope on that, there's more often than not, you're going to be pulled into court, which means that officer is off the road for potentially a day, maybe 2 days, depending on how remands go. And there you are. So those are fundamentals we got to consider about it, right? The use of force, and the authority legitimately, fairly, effectively. We want to make sure that anytime we have to use force, that of course is legal and it was necessary, right? And again, that there was no other option. Okay, so like I said, those are some of the issues that I think that we are targeting, and it is thought about every time we're creating budgets. For instance, creating platoons. Utilizing those resources to the best we can. And again, overall, we have to satisfy the citizens' demand for prompt and effective and fair service, right? We want to make sure that, the public feels that they're safer, that this is warranted. And, I guess as the trend went to defund the police, there was a lot of people that didn't feel that was the case, right? It's not that they didn't feel it was the case. In a lot of cases, I'm sure that it wasn't the case. And it is. As a law enforcement officer, it disturbs me. All right. And it does. It pisses me off, that there's some videos that I see just like you folks. I look at it and I shake my head and I go, what is going on here? Right. I may not have had all the information. That's always in the back of my head. I'm only seeing 2 minutes of maybe a 10-minute video or 2 minutes of a 15-minute issue, or the officers had more information than any of us ever would have, because they've got history on this individual, and I know there's people could throw me 1,000 links right now to say, you tell me that you didn't have all the information watching this. And even if you had all the information, does that still make it right? And I would agree with you and say, no, it doesn't make it right. Absolutely not. And I hope they got called in for it, and I hope they got dealt with accordingly, according to law, right? Not just certainly policies of the police department, right? Or protections from unions or anything to that nature. Look, New York, we know that New York, and I remember reading this, that New York absolutely, there was enough cops coming forward to say, yeah, there was quotas, 100%. It wasn't just the staff sergeant or the commander, in briefing saying, come on guys, you want those numbers up there today? You know what? There's people out there breaking the law. You got a ticket book, go fill them, right? That's it. It's performance of expectation. It's kind of like a coach in the beginning of the game. Come on guys, go out there and let's get the points, Well, you're trying to drum up your officers, get them out there to go out and do your job. We don't want you taking an extra 10 minutes on lunch. We want you to go out there and do your job. Be a presence, right? Engage with the community, right? Stop offenses, right? Be proactive while you're being reactive, right? It's a tough balance. It really is. And again, there's going to be officers that are going to listen to this and say, oh man, you obviously have not worked in a big city. I have worked in a big city, right? And I do know how it works. 20 calls behind, and you got no resources. Matter of fact, you're working through your lunches. You're working overtime. And you're burned out. I get it. And finally you get to, week 8 of this and you're sitting there, God, I just don't want to. You go home, you got no quality of life. You're taking it home with you. It's not just a job you're taking home, but you're taking the stressors home. You're exhausted. Kids want to do stuff and I just don't want to. you know? And I get that. And it's tough, right? And again, people feel like they're just being targeted just left, right, and center. But if we take what we read and consume online, we also have to understand that's not us. So we shouldn't take that in to say, oh, I've been harassed, 15 times this year. Well, no, it's not you. It's actually, there's people. And if we collect all the videos from everybody in the world, it's going to feel pretty overwhelming, no doubt. But if you start looking at the good that police officers do, right, in a community, police officers do a lot of good in communities. There's community-based police officers that go out and they speak at schools. They take their time and they volunteer for a plethora of different things. Special Olympics, whether it's certainly boys and girls clubs, basketball, hockey, baseball, outdoor events. I was one of those officers that took groups of kids out there with their parents, for day events out in the wilderness to teach them about wilderness surviving and camping, right? To get them more involved in that. Parents and such that were absolutely interested in that, and that went through. And I've got lots of stories, and I know families, that I've been involved with that went forward with that, and it became a part of their lives, which was just fantastic. Going out and getting out of the cities, getting out of their phones, getting out of the electronics, and out there and just enjoying what nature had to offer. Looking at the tiny things, as much as it is lifting up a rock and watching a bunch of ants run around and seeing how they'll build their colonies, for instance, and explaining a little bit about that, right? And some of these are fire ants, and these are a little more different. It's interesting. It's an interesting world we live in, and I think we've gotten away from that because we stay inside and keep the bugs outside for the most part. So, and again, when I'm talking about the idea of quotas, it's just, again, I can't say that there's no such thing because there's going to be people that are going to absolutely think there is, or that there is, and maybe there is in the United States. In Canada, I just haven't heard of it. I just haven't heard of it. And it's not to say that I've been exposed to every single police department that's Canada, because there's a lot of them. Okay, it's not just each province has it, or each state has its own state or provincial police service, and that's it. Plus our federal service with the RCMP, of course. But like I said, there's a lot of town police. And so I don't know how they run each individual one of them, but I can say from conferences and so on, that doesn't seem to be the case. We understand that is a wrong strategy and a wrong approach on so many different levels, right? So when we don't hand out a ticket to somebody, there's a good rhyme and reason for that. And it's not just because, one guy said, I pulled over a young lady and she says, and I came back with her driver's license and I had the ticket in hand, but she didn't realize it because it was under under her documents, and just the way the documents were laid out, she couldn't see that there was a citation there, and it was for speeding, right? And I did reduce the ticket because she had no other priors and so on, and she was courteous, and there was no problem. There was no other contributing factors to her speed. She just was in the zone speeding. Okay, so she got a small fine with no demerit points added to her license. But when I came up, she looked at me, and she was a younger girl, and she goes, "I hope I'm not getting a ticket. Pretty girls don't get tickets, right?" And I did. I took a kind of offense to that. She was definitely a pretty girl. There was no doubt about that, right? And she called it right. She was a pretty girl, but I needed to correct her on that and to say, that's not how that works. Okay. Yes, pretty girls can get tickets, right? Older men can get tickets, younger men can get tickets. Everybody qualifies for a ticket. It's whether or not they get the ticket. That's the other thing. And there's going to be a plethora of different reasons why they're actually issued that citation. And there is, and I've worked with those officers. They go, nope, I have discretion, but the discretion basically is whether or not I pull them over, right? If I pull them over, they're getting the ticket, right? It's the judge's job to decide whether or not, they get the ticket if they make that decision to fight the ticket, right? Or dispute that citation. And I have to respect that. I get it and I understand that. I don't operate that way. That's not how I operate. And there's, again, because we don't have standardization in that sense, nobody is saying to us, if you pull them over, they get the ticket. This is what about traffic cameras, for instance. There is no bias there, right? Traffic camera comes up there, boom. The registered owner of that car, right, or vehicle gets the ticket. Doesn't matter if their cousin borrowed the car. Doesn't matter if the car was stolen. Doesn't matter if any of these things. Well, maybe the car was stolen. You might be able to dispute that. It is terribly difficult to dispute a speed camera ticket, and they are on the rise. And so, quite frankly, we should probably, there's a lot of people, including myself, I know that they would do a lot of good. And a lot of people say, hey, we need more speed cameras, right, to slow things down because officers can't be everywhere. They've got criminal files to deal with and so on. So they can't just sit endlessly on that particular roadway all day long, all night long, monitoring speed there. It just can't happen. So, because that wouldn't be using your your resources efficiently or effectively. So speed cameras do have a place, there's no doubt, but I do strongly suggest that again, there's no discretion there, which in some cases they can say that's good. It's a good thing there's no discretion, right? It means that there's no bias, there's no profiling. That takes away all of that. It's like, nope, everybody's equal in the eyes of the camera. If you did something wrong, the camera catches it and that's it. Providing the camera was working accurately and it was your vehicle and there's nothing to dispute there, right? You get the ticket, right? So, and here's full disclosure. The only one ticket that I've ever got in my life, and it's not because I have a badge or anything of that nature, it's because it was a speed camera that got me, right? And that's it. I got a ticket. And was no room to dispute it. Matter of fact, this camera was so decent and well placed that, well, it showed me right in the driver's seat, right? So I went through a yellow light, and again, the yellow light was prolonged in such a way that it was cresting on the red when I came through it. At the time, bad calculation on my part, right? The camera is set up to snap that photo and send off the citation and the picture in the mail. Like I said, I get this picture in the mail and there it is, me driving the car, and there it is. I get the ticket. And it was a hefty one too. They have a tendency to be a little more expensive, those speed camera tickets, at least in my experience and certainly what I know about them. So that's something to be said for that. And hopefully I've answered that to, probably ad nauseam, quite frankly, but we want to make sure that we're doing as best we can. And I think that, and I'm confident, at least in Canada here, we're consistently working at it to try to make it better, right? That our police services are operating on some kind of standardized platform that can be kind of universal across the board to some degree. Each province, just like each state, has their own way of doing things and own laws, how they write them. They're fairly similar though, right? But the overall, of course, is community safety. That's the big thing, right? It's community safety and making sure that every citizen, whether they're visiting, whether they're from a different country, it doesn't really matter. We want to make sure that every person in Canada is able to enjoy their space that they're occupying at that moment in a peaceful and safe way. All right, that's it. And we're there to oversee that with a focus on that while everybody can focus on enjoying their lives. But we want to make sure that people are focusing on safety. Right? Especially when it comes to traffic. This is what comes to my mind a lot of the time. Like I said, there's a lot of stressors right now. Right? There's a lot of stressors. We've got financial challenges that are happening everywhere, and we're all affected by that to some degree. We're all affected. Even the people who seem to have a plethora of money, they're affected. It just doesn't hit them as negatively, right? But they're absolutely affected by it. There's no doubt. And I would say that there's probably some people out there that are cashing in on other people's grief, and I could promise you that's happening. So again, what I can say is that the greatest challenge lies not in identifying the inefficiencies that exist in the justice system or in policing, but rather acting to address them, right? I mean, to date, there has been few initiatives to develop standardized practices in an attempt to address these inefficiencies, right? We know what's wrong, in other words, but we need to find a solution and then implement that solution, right? We can tabletop it all we like, but then when you get into real world applications, there can be challenges. And so it can take time. But I have faith. I have faith in that system that it's gonna get better. And so if we take our most brilliant minds, which may not be me, okay, when it comes down to actually putting all these places, all these standardized approaches in place, but we're getting there. I see results, which is good, right? But I also see that our communities are getting more difficult to manage, right? And to ensure that safety. Crime in general is on the rise. There's no doubt, right? It is absolutely on the rise in pretty much every category. And it's concerning. It's concerning enough that there's even law enforcement officers that are out there saying, yeah, I'm opting out. I'm out. I'm going to quit. And again, this comes back to it, and people taking early retirement, for instance. And there's a whole bunch of issues out there, social issues, the whole 9 yards, that are just challenging it at every stop. And yeah, I agree with, a former partner I had a conversation with a couple weeks ago, and he says, I'm worried. I'm really worried for policing in Canada going forward. I'm just generally worried. And I get that. Right. So one more reminder to folks, if you're going to leave a voice message or any kind of message on any particular platform, you are putting it out there, basically someone to copy it down, to pull that recording, to screenshot it, and it stays there for life if they want it to. So be very mindful when you actually post something. Don't utter any threats, okay, or they can be construed as a threat that somebody can follow up on, right? We don't want to do that. We want to communicate effectively, professionally, responsibly, right? And with being courteous, okay? So that's really important. So there's just a reminder. And I know everybody's under a lot of stress and what have you. And a lot of people have some bias there. They, information bias. They think, that's it. And a lot of that I think is an indoctrination to some degree too. I'm not going to say that the individual that left me this message here was certainly any of those categories fit, but like I said, there were any factors that might fit for them. But like I said, so there's probably some free legal advice for you. So anyways, hopefully we've looked at that again. You know what? Now, officers do have discretion, and not saying that every officer's, is going to have the discretion to not ticket or to ticket, and they're going to have their own parameters to why they actually lay that citation or don't, or pull you over or don't. So a lot of times, I'll drive by and I'll see somebody, a little bit over the speed limit and give the little flick of the up top lights there, and the little disco show gets them to go, oh, gee whiz, they must be looking at me. And but it's the 4 people that are behind them too. They look down at their speedometer, right? And they look at me, oh, geez, maybe we should all slow down a little bit. And that's it. I've done my job, right? I've educated a few people along the way and said, hey, guys, let's just keep it cool, right? You got a couple kids up there, hop, skip, and jump there on a sidewalk that doesn't have a curb, and we want to make sure that everybody stays safe, right? So, anyways. So that's it. If you got any questions on that, hopefully I've put that together fairly well for everybody. Yeah, I am. I'm very passionate about, community policing in that sense, of making sure that everybody enjoys that, including my family, right? Your family. I want to make sure that everybody's safe. Doesn't matter where you are. And if you have concerns, it's up to us to go to our council, go to our police departments. Not just about filing a complaint, just sitting down with a senior officer and saying, these are the observations I have. Can you clarify this for me? Can we change this somehow, right? Sometimes that grassroots approach can be the first step in creating something better. Right? So I urge you to do that instead of maybe going out and protest or anything of that nature. Just sit down and have a talk. Right? If that doesn't work, then we can escalate from there, right? And we can try to approach it from a different angle. But like I said, most people that get in law enforcement, they get in law enforcement because they want to help. At least that's what I would like to believe. That's for sure. So there it is, folks. If you want to reach out to us, aninformedstateofmind@gmail.com. And you can certainly reach out to us on any of the platforms we've got there in the show notes. And, of course, you can leave a voice message. So check us out there. And until next time, stay safe, follow the rules, okay? And if you're not sure what the rules are, research them, especially the traffic acts that may regulate traffic and automobile conveyance. It's your responsibility. They say ignorance is no excuse for the law. Well, it is true, right? So you'll improve your chances of making sure that you stay outside of a ticket and bog you down with some charges or anything of that nature. And again, some monetary fines there. And it's not about the monetary fines. We want to make sure that everybody's safe. Right? So, until next time, folks, take good care. Echo, did you like the show? This has been a Rush Creek production.